Economic fallout from the pandemic has put many renters and property owners at risk for displacement. There has been some relief for them over the past year, but its reach has been limited. One response is the effort by our guests to strengthen the city's protections for renters from displacement by condo conversions through an ordinance approved last week by the Boston City Council. We'd like to welcome the councilor from District 1, East Boston, Charlestown, and North End Waterfront, Lydia Edwards. Thank you very much for being with us, councilor.
Thank you so much for having me. Very excited to talk about what we got done as a city council. As you mentioned, it is an increase in moving on work already done actually by other councilors to make sure we protect a lot of tenants from displacement.
Well, one of the things that I think is motivating you to work on this is what you see going on, especially in East Boston, as far as people being displaced. What's going on?
Well, I mean, there's been an issue of the traditional triple decker, the traditional multifamily home really being kind of purchased for stock value and then cut up into condos that are luxury. And that is resulting in a lot of people who live there not being able to afford to stay or being told they have to leave. And we want to make sure that people are aware of their rights. We have a very robust condo conversion law that applies to units that are 4 units or above. But essentially, if someone purchases it, they need to provide certain protections and move out incentives for individuals. If you are a person who has a disability, or if you're a low-income resident, and you're entitled to a good chunk of money, up to $15,000 now, to help you relocate, and you can renegotiate for a longer-term lease up to 5 years, preventing any eviction from you having to go. These are huge protections, and they've been on the books, maybe at lower values, but they've been on the books for years. And what we have found is there was a massive loophole in that they would clear out the building and then sell it, and then say there's no tenants to protect. And I'm so proud of the city council, or excuse me, of the city of Boston, DND specifically, working with Greater Boston Legal Services, my office, and making sure that we closed that loophole. And we created a whole new permitting system so that if you want to convert your units into a condo, you're going to have to get a special permit now. And part of that is demonstrating you informed all the tenants, not just who are there, but who've been there in the last 12 months, of their rights, making sure they were paid appropriately, making sure they're giving the right of first refusal, right? We have that. All of those things are on the books, and we actually extended that amount from 90 days to 120 days. All of these protections to make sure people are standing in a dignified position to negotiate. And that's, I think, one of the hardest things for people who are facing displacement. They feel completely powerless and bulldozed over.
Of course, you want to make sure renters in these situations know their rights. If they're in the process of being cleared, will it be, evident enough to them so that they realize this is a situation where they can invoke those condo conversion protections?
Well, that's the best thing about this, is we're getting so far upstream that with a special permit, the city of Boston will be notified that you also want to create condos. So it shouldn't be all on the tenants' shoulders to negotiate this. They're already, some of them facing a pandemic, have lost their jobs. Some of them are trying to make sure their kids are somehow taken care of throughout the day because they're not in schools. And they're also trying to find a new place to live. The city of Boston needs to be at that table to alleviate some of that burden, to make sure they're given their rights and know their rights and given their incentives as the law requires. And so now the Office of Housing Stability will be given a notification about this new special permit, and that office will confirm that the developer has actually informed and spoken with the tenants, not just there, but the ones who lived there in the last 12 months.
One of the other issues that I'm sure you've been following is the distribution of vaccines in the city. I think the latest figures from Boston shows there's still a lag, especially when it comes to the Latinx population. I think you had a conversation, you were in a conversation about that recently. What do you see now?
Well, I think what I'm happy to see is that we are playing on our diversity as city councilors and leaders. We have Councilor Mejia, the first Latina who's been on the city council. We have Councilor Arroyo as well. So we have 2 folks in the Latinx community who are already known leaders. And then myself and I think Michelle and a couple, Kenzie, we also speak Spanish. And we're playing on the skill sets that we have to get into the communities that we either represent. Myself, East Boston, having one of the largest Latinx populations, and doing what we should be doing, which is grassroots work, phone calls, phone banking, and getting to people. And it's twofold. 1, letting them know how to get the vaccine. And then 2, letting them know to trust it. There's a lot of mistrust with this because for many people, they get too much of their news on social media, and under a prior administration, doubting scientists became, excuse me, sorry about that. We cannot afford to doubt our scientists anymore. We need to trust them, and we need the community to trust them as well.
I wonder about language barriers because even people whose first language is American English, they have a hard time navigating through the website. Anybody else, I imagine, it's going to be very daunting.
Well, I can join the parade of people who've been very critical of of Governor Baker about his rollout, about how it wasn't culturally sensitive or inclusive. I can join that. I choose to, yes, acknowledge that he had messed up in some ways, but I'd rather get on the ground right now and help people. And what we've done, I want to say the Boston COVID Coalition really did an amazing job with the phone banking and getting out there, specifically having a massive vaccine site at Reggie Lewis Center, and pushing for people to come there, giving the rides, getting on the phone in more than one language and answering all their questions and making sure they're making their appointments. So that's the work that we need to do as elected officials. We just need to lead, and we'll worry about the criticisms, but right now we're trying to save lives.
Councilor, I want to ask you about the recent regulatory decision that allows the Eversource substation to be built in East Boston. There is widespread opposition to that in the community, including from you.
Yep.
But is the fight over now, or is there still maybe hope you could stop this?
Well, East Boston is a community that is used to fighting large institutions. There are people who are still fighting against Massport and the airport. And so that's the legacy that we've inherited. I just want to give a shout out to Edie DeAngelis, one of the original Maverick Street mothers who passed away recently. And it's basically for her legacy and in her name, as well as Mary Ellen Welch, that we're going to continue to fight this. As a matter of fact, we are going to push for a non-binding ballot initiative that will be available this November for all of Boston to vote on whether East Boston should get the substation or not. Yes, it is non-binding, but it's the statement and it's the solidarity from every single neighborhood that we are seeking to say that this is not fair. This shouldn't be happening to anybody. And when East Boston is being taken advantage of, it matters to Roxbury, it matters to Jamaica Plain, it matters to Beacon Hill and every other place. So we're going to be organizing and then again pushing for Eversource to move it. We're not even saying don't build it. We're saying this makes no sense for it to be in the middle of a neighborhood.
Is there another place in East Boston where you could safely put this, or you simply have to rely on other sources of power to fill the gap?
Let's be clear, no one who lives in East Boston is claiming there's a gap. Only Eversource is, and it's based off of their study that they have said that we desperately need their infrastructure that ironically we have to pay for. So they said you need this according to our study and you have to pay for it. And yes, we have talked about Massport as a potential location further up the creek in the marine industrial areas that is already zoned for industrial use, not in a neighborhood. There are different locations. And again, we pay for it. They're not coming out of pocket. They're just coming out of time, but we pay for this infrastructure. So if they have to redirect it or do it, the ratepayers, such as myself and those in East Boston, will be paying for it.
One of the other issues you've been working on is the linkage payments from developers to the city for affordable housing and job training. You want to see this updated in some way. What needs to be changed?
Well, I'm so happy that Mayor Walsh updated the linkage and brought us basically to the level funding that we should have been if we kept with the CPI consumer index. But and that increase was a large one, 42%. It really speaks to how little we had done in terms of increasing it over the years. So we're there now. And we're so happy the State House passed our home rule petition that allows for Boston to turn up or turn down the dial on our own without having to seek permission from the State House. But with that power comes great responsibility, and we need to assess how far we need to go. I think we need to turn it up. I think we need to make sure that our studies are very clear and the timelines. I want to make sure that as projects are amended or as buildings go up, they're using the new linkage and the new rates that are at that time. There's a lot of different things we want to absolutely make sure are part of the new law. And since it's a family conversation, finally, and I say that quite frankly, it's right there in City Council with developers, with the Zoning Commission, with the BPDA, with advocates. We can come to that perfect little balance that allows it for us to recover, but also allows for us to get the much needed funds for housing.
Speaking of balance, could this also maybe be a delicate time? I know everybody in the world wants to build a lab somewhere in Boston, but other than that, there are a lot of question marks about how profitable development can be in the city, aren't there?
Well, yes, and no. I'm sure that as far as developers are concerned, they're always concerned about us hurting the market. They were concerned about it when they were making record numbers, and they're concerned about it now. But there's no indication, I mean, in terms of the market for renters, that the rents are going down or that they're becoming more affordable. Yes, they have come down. Are they more affordable? Still no. So developers are making their money, and that's fine. But we still, as a city, need to extract more resources to keep people in Boston, to allow them to become homeowners, to allow them to pay for their rent.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you for this opportunity. Look forward to catching up again. Take care.
Okay, that was Lydia Edwards, the District 1 City Councilor. We'll have more news in just a moment.